Redditors who work for the government, what's the most messed up thing you ever saw or heard? I worked for that sir. In all seriousness, the potential threats that are out there are so hard to detect, but with the current training and technology we use is so inadequate it would be impossible to stop a sophisticated attack. The only way would be to ban all carry-on luggage. No, I didn't have an opinion before I started working for them. I just needed a job and wanted to keep racking up federal time for retirement. After working for them for 4 years, it makes me sick how much money they waste and how much they violate privacy and personal freedom. Now I work for the VAB. My job is to fire people. We had a recent case where a nurse took a patient to the bathroom because he didn't want to use the bedpan. He was on 8L of oxygen, and instead of getting a longer tube or portable oxygen bottle, she just unhooked him. She left him unattended for 20 minutes, and he was dead. When she came back, it's shocking how hard it is to fire people in the federal government. What's the difference between a van nurse and a bullet? A bullet is fireable and only kills one person. Sister is a nurse. Additionally, I work at a hospital and have so much respect for the nurses, but VA nurses by and large are a different breed. Where I was at the VA, they couldn't fire anyone for being late, because if you noticed one person being consistently late, you couldn't fire them unless you put in the effort to mark down the time when every single employee came to their shift, as it would be considered singling them out. To say the least, anyone who gave a crap was quickly shut down. I have even more stories about how absolutely terrible their air was, and I'm not talking about minor things, but things that are just downright terrifying. A long time ago, I used to visit the Pentagon regularly. Their biggest joke I ever saw there was their laptop policy. You had to log any personal laptop into the building by serial number and get a card, which let you take that original laptop back out for security reasons. Right. But if you had a government stickered laptop in your possession, you could just walk out with it. No paper or proof of ownership required. The best part, the reason for the role was to prevent stealing government laptops. Still not sure how that worked. I worked for the state government for a while. There was a policy against using removable media, no matter what. Makes sense. A co-worker told me about him and the guys he managed being in a meeting with the IT security department, and its security, passed around a USB drive for everybody to copy off a PowerPoint. He refused to continue with the meeting. Funniest thing that happened to me was when I started, and they didn't even have a computer for me for several days. I was a software developer. Then when a secretary found an unused one on the other side of the building, she wanted me to carry the desktop, and she would carry the monitor and keyboard still connected, so that it would save me time having to reconnect them. I worked with an older guy who always had Spycraft magazines. He'd talk about all the macro cameras and hidden mix you could get and how cheap they were. He had multiple rental properties, and he and our boss were besties. Well, every time I'd have a conversation in our office where the boss didn't sit, the boss would later call and specifically address something that was said. Fast forward a year and we get a student intern. She was 18 and cute. The older guy always hit on her and made awkward comments, but she shrugged it off. One day, he was being overly flirty and she mentioned her boyfriend. He was like, "Well, I'll get a pic of you in the shower and put it on a billboard, then everyone will see it." She was like, "EWW, stop it." It bugged me bad. Late the next afternoon, I called and reported it to the EEO or someone. This was 20 years ago anonymously, but they needed my name to verify I was an actual employee, etc., etc. I said no way this can get back, because they are friends, but reluctantly gave my name. The very next morning I came to work and immediately got a call from my boss. "Why in the world would you call in and report this? You should have come to me about this and let me handle it at my level." Luckily they called me and will let me handle it. His handling it meant I had to go and apologize to the old guy, the young girl, and my other co-worker while my boss was there to ensure I did it and wouldn't do it again. I was devastated. I'll never report anything again. Ever. Not me. However, we had a very special customer who liked to visit our campground and was directly under the Secretary of State during the Bill Clinton years. You would assume this woman was a highly educated brain in charge of sensitive information. I, as a store clerk of 17, had to explain things to her several times that she just didn't seem to grasp in the slightest point. Maybe it's not in her realm of understanding, but a tutorial on wax fly strips and how to use lighter fluid seemed pretty shocking. I've come to realize at 17 that coming from money allows people to secure their way in life. And the smartest person you know could be stuck cleaning toilets with no real way out. Used to do contract work for a county, had to fix a computer for an investigator that worked child abuse cases. I was warned about the material ahead of time. Software I had to work on was cataloging images. Let me tell you that I walked out of there in tears after seeing the absolutely monstrous sh people have done to kids. I fixed the problem and got there as fast as I could. Props to those investigators. I couldn't do that kind of work. Retired inpatient ped psych RN. Here, we have to read about / learn about each kid's unique trauma situation, because it is important to know their specific triggers, sometimes as random as the smell of a certain type of soap, sometimes as obvious as any kind of physical contact. Working with kids, 4.5-yo 19-yo, who have been chained to basement bathrooms, etc. Walk out of the parking lot at the end of your shift with the sole goal of making it to your car before you start crying. The images are horrific. What's left of the humans at the end of all that is soul crushing. Good on you for helping the people who catch those MFRs. That the manager's bonus packages were dependent of them reaching goals that didn't always match the needs of the governmental body I worked for. So come the end of the year, when performance is measured, management would ask us to drop everything we were doing and do something else instead so they could get their bonus. That meant we'd get further behind in our work, and that meant that the taxpayers, whose lives we were screwing with, would experience further delays in their cases getting settled. I was working in 2D program management, doing procurement and research and development. Anyone doing this stuff learns about colors of money, which refers to budgetary categories of funding. The big three I dealt with were N, procurement and R&D funding. Operations and maintenance. Navy is for operational costs, consumables, and things like labor costs. It has a cap on single item or aggregate costs of $250K, meaning I can buy office computers with it if the total cost is less than $250K, or I can buy replacement parts for something or whatever if I need to buy more than $250K single item cost or aggregate cost. I need to use procurement dollars. Procurement dollars are for purchasing real assets, things that are complete systems and have long-term value. It can be as small as something like a sidearm or as big as something like a warship. It has no minimum or maximum cap, just the stipulation that it's a real asset, so you can't pay for services like training or other labor unless it's rolled into the purchasing cost of a new system. R&D is for funding things like making a new system or integrating a replacement into an existing system. Software development, hardware development, initial prototypes, etc. I'm tasked with replacing this widget that is a subsystem of an existing system. Deliberately being vague, I find a great fix for it. Got this replacement widget, and it's a mission critical subsystem. So the funding source, Sugar Daddy and the Pentagon, says hey, this other group we fund isn't ready to spend their procurement dollars, so we are giving it to you. Cool, I've got funding. One of the weirdest things about 2D acquisitions is that every time you transfer funding between commands or groups or business offices is that there is a transfer fee of some percentage. The business office handling the account uses the fee to fund their operations or something. It's bizarre. Because of this, the funds now designated to fund my widget are left with a group that had failed to use it to avoid the transfer fee, and they are a bunch of silver-haired trolls living in the basement who evidently rate their self-worth on how big the budget they control is, are pissed about having this funding being taken away from them, and have convinced the Pentagon Sugar Daddy that they get to retain control over the funding, even though it's not for their program anymore. It was a power grab to expand their budget and program control, talking about $21 million in several different buckets of value. Specifically about $11 million of it, so losing like 5% in transfer was suboptimal. Now, be me, less than 2 years in the job, about 33 years old, junior officer, be the trolls, retired senior officers, that are GS13 GS15s with the senior person, being a reserve 06 officer, as well as a GS15, 30 plus years of experience each, They collectively tell me I can't use their procurement dollars to buy my widget because the initial approved proposal was going to cost $300k per unit for 30 units, and I'd found a way to do the replacement for $120k per unit, saving the gov a cool $5 mil. I quote the relevant guidance that says I can use procurement dollars to buy the widget. There is no per unit cost requirement on procurement dollars. There's an upper cap on N dollars, which is not this stuff. They repeatedly provide me with their internal acquisition guidance document that clearly states they have a procurement dollars minimum per unit price of $250k per unit. They refuse to authorize the funds for expenditure. I go to our acquisitions legal department. They think procurement has a minimum per unit cost. I check with a bigger legal department in our building. They think the same thing. I check with the freaking acquisition legal department in the damn Pentagon. They think the same thing. They all think procurement dollars require a per unit cost of $250k. I do an analytical write-up of how everyone is wrong and provide to the legal department for the command the next 2 echelons up. We were an echelon 4 command and our next layer up was dual hat headers echelon 3 and 2. So I wasn't jumping. They concur with my analysis. Concur that the trolls in the basement had an arbitrary restriction on procurement dollars, not in accordance with the law, and green light me purchasing the widget. A few months go by and no funds are executed. I'm not interested in dealing with the nasty trolls in the basement, so I'm touching base with the business offices that handle the actual fund transfers. Nothing. I finally find out that the holdup has been that the trolls formally accused me of malfeasance and reported meetances, and the wait was for an investigation, which never contacted me. Nothing was found amiss, and the trolls eventually were forced to transfer the funds, losing the transfer fee out of their direct control because of the lengths they were going to in order to sabotage the use of their funding. Forgetting that this widget is an honest, not PowerPoint mafia bullsh, national defense mission, and their machinations literally endanger American lives. Let's look back at this a second, though. All these legal departments thought there was a per unit price minimum of $250k with procurement dollars. The Doody acquisition site uses the example of a command using procurement dollars to purchase firearms for their security details. Small arms really, seriously, do not cost $250k each. Yet these big time 30+ years of experience graybirds all thought that. I look back on how the market average cost for damn near everything I'd been researching was over $250k, but the parts list inside the widget was always maybe $60k. Huge markups, a stupid error got multiplied through multiple departments and multiple commands, and taught the supporting industries to always charge at least $250k per unit, regardless of what the actual hardware cost was. Even though there are limits to what the profit margins can be on systems, it was all sidestepped to make sure it met the per unit price minimum requirement that didn't exist. I can't guess how long this had been going on, or how many billions of dollars were spent supporting an everybody knows condition.